suggest to you that I did not readily know all of the details of Juneteenth. When I was a youngster, I, like so many others, were miseducated about those things that took place in these United States. I grew up here on Long Island, and I was a fifth grade student, Park Avenue Elementary School, where Mr. Hodgson told me that the slaves were happy because they were fed and clothed. 3 years later, at Andy Lewter Junior High School, my seventh grade social studies teacher, Mr. Berry, said that slavery was not the reason for the Civil War. And of course, I would discover later that those things that they had told me indeed were not true. Multiple times today, the history of this day has been cited and recited in your hearing. I dare not be redundant and repetitive and go over it again. But let me say and suggest to you that ever since January 6th, I'm trying to be careful.
That's all right.
Ever since January 6th, has been widely reported that the capital of these United States had not been attacked since the War of 1812 in the year 1814. But to arrive at such a conclusion is to misrepresent history. Because the truth of the matter is that 1814 was not the only time that the Capitol was assaulted. We cannot forget February 13th of 1861, which bears a striking resemblance to where we are today. It came on the heels of the election of Abraham Lincoln. Former governor of Virginia, Henry Wise, announced, "We will not accept the outcome of the election of 1860. Thousands poured into Washington, D.C., armed and with the full intent of occupying the Capitol and preventing the Congress from casting the certifying vote that would make Abraham Lincoln the President of the United States." Can I talk up in here? Sounds strikingly familiar.
Hello.
Some of the things that we see and we hear today. The reason that effort was thwarted was because an aging general by the name of Winfield Scott, who at the time was living in the state of New York, got wind of the insurrection, returned to Washington, D.C., marshaled the military, put military soldiers in the door of the Capitol and cannons in the window. Those who would have done the deed of destruction and dismantling democracy were thwarted in their efforts. So, January 1st, 1863, the Emancipation Proclamation went into effect. I grew up every year anticipating what in our community and culture is called the watch night service, where 4 pairs of deacons will occupy the 4 corners of the church, 2 in the north, 2 in the south, 2 in the east, and 2 in the west. And at around 11:55 p.m., scriptural readings would be rendered to the congregation, and then periodically the pastor would raise the question, "Watchman in the north, what time is it? Watchman in the south, watchman in the east, watchman in the west, what time is it?" And at 12 midnight, it would be announced that it is a new year. That service that was handed down to me by my father, and to him by his father, and to him by his father, goes all the way back to this Emancipation Proclamation, when all across this country, people who had been enslaved stood watch because as the clock struck 12, former slaves could now claim to be free. So I want to close today with a reminder and an admonition for each and every one of us. The truth of the matter is that democracy is fragile.
That's right.
What we have seen in these last several years is the expansion and the contraction of freedom. It's not been a level ride. We've had some ups, we've had some downs. But as I've heard it said today, we are still here. I know I'm not in church, but if I were, I tell you right now, turn to a neighbor. Tell your neighbor, we're still here. Come on, turn to somebody else and say, we are still here. And despite the best efforts to minimize and undermine our journey in this country, I can proudly say today, we are still here. Expansion and contraction. Beginning in 1866, there were multiple events that took place all across this country celebrating what we are celebrating today. In Appomattox, Virginia, former slaves gathered on the battlefield to celebrate what they called Surrender Day, when General Lee surrendered to Ulysses S. Grant. In Richmond, Virginia, former slaves gathered in the streets and celebrated what they called Freedom Day. And yes, in Washington, D.C., from 1866 to 1901, blacks gathered each year, paraded through the streets, past the White House, where President Johnson, Andrew, not Lyndon, Grant would come out on the balcony of the White House and acknowledge the parade that would go by. And with great intentionality and deliberacy, those former slaves who were celebrating Emancipation Day, watch this, marched past the White House and gathered as the destination of their parade, Lafayette Square, just a few blocks beyond the White House. And there they would gather and celebrate what was Emancipation Day. But they didn't arbitrarily or randomly select Lafayette Square. They selected Lafayette Square because prior to the Civil War, Lafayette Square had been a slave market. Come on! And so the same place where their mothers and fathers, grandparents, aunts and uncles were sold as slaves became the same place where the children and grandchildren, nieces and nephews could celebrate their freedom. And that's why on June 1st of 2020, the actions of the former administration was a particular affront to us. When the former president marched into that same sacred Lafayette Square and released tear gas on black protesters so that he could take a picture of himself with a Bible that was turned upside down.
Looking good.
We've got some questions. We've got some expectations. In the words of Martin, we have some difficult days ahead. And I want to be politically correct, and I don't want to put anybody on the spot. Don't want to embarrass, throw anyone under the bus. But I think we have a right to really believe that in this country, nobody is above the law. Nothing. My. I thought I was George Whitfield and this was an outdoor revival. So I've been wrestling with how to diplomatically and delicately raise the question, even to our Attorney General, how after 6 years of what is apparently and obviously criminal behavior, when can we expect to see the president of a former administration naked for an orange jumpsuit? Can I talk in here? Can I feel the water? So, beloved, I bid you good day.
Say it again.
I thank you for your time and your rapt attention. But we're still standing. That we've come this far by faith. I channel the spirit of Martin Luther King when I say, my country 'tis of thee. Sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. So, beloved, as I return to my seat, let freedom ring. Don't allow the iniquities that we see, let freedom ring. Don't allow the dark clouds we go through, but let freedom ring. Don't allow the setbacks that we've gone through, but let freedom ring. Don't allow the rain that we see, but let